All right, well, welcome to this lecture on 2.3, the macromolecules. So DQ for you, what kind of substances do not dissolve in water? 50-50. Is it polar or non-polar? I hope you were all writing non-polar on your DQ sheets if you have them. Remember, water is polar, and polar substances will dissolve polar substances. So if you take something and you put it in water and it dissolves, there's a good chance that that solute is polar. Okay, so substances that don't dissolve or don't mix in water are considered nonpolar. So oils, great example. Waxes, dirt. Okay, moving on. So today's lecture is on 2.3, the carbon compounds, and I like to call them the macromolecules or biomolecules because, life is made up of cells. And if you ask yourself what are cells made up of, eventually you're going to get to an atom. But what's the link between an atom and a cell? Well, it's macromolecules, okay? A cell is made up of these four types of large molecules. So I'm going to talk about the importance of carbon, okay? I'm sure maybe you've watched some sci-fi movies and they might say, greetings, carbon life forms. Well, why do they say that? Well, I'm going to talk about why carbon is basically found in all living things. And then I'm going to go through the four macromolecules, okay? These four molecules: carbs, carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids, and talk about their monomers, what are they made up of, and then talk about their function. Okay, how do cells utilize these macromolecules? So let's kick things off with carbon here. Carbon is unique because it has 4 valence electrons in its outermost shell. All right, so if I were to get my little pen here and draw carbon out, okay, first energy level holds 2, 1, 2. Second energy level, got to get to 6 because it's got 6 protons and 6 electrons. So 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so it has these 4 empty spots. And carbon isn't going to give up these 4 electrons. That takes too much energy. So what it's going to do is it's going to share these 4 electrons with other things so that it can get to 8. Because if it shares a pair, I'll share this carbon. If you share your carbon, okay, now it has 5. If it shares a carbon with a hydrogen, okay, they're going to share those electrons. So now it's at 6, and then it just needs 2 more to get to 8, and vice versa. So carbon's going to share 4 pairs of electrons to get to 8. And as a result, it has this ability to bond with many elements. Okay, many elements, and it can even bond with itself. It can, and what I mean by that is another carbon atom. So it can bond with carbon atoms, and there's no repulsion forces whatsoever. So, because of its ability to form 4 bonds, it can create some unique shapes, some unique structures. Okay, they could be straight chained. So you notice this carbon has 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 bonds. This carbon's got 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so it can form straight chains. It can form branches. Okay, it can form rings. So because it can form these fundamental structures, it makes up a lot of things that are very important to life and to Earth. It can also form many types of bonds. If it just wants to share an electron with this hydrogen and this hydrogen and this hydrogen and this carbon, single bonds, yeah. But it can also form double bonds. Okay, so it's still 4 bonds. 1, 2, 3, 4, just with 3 atoms. Triple bonds. Okay, not everything can form triple bonds. Like hydrogen can only form single bonds. Hydrogen can form a double bond. So the fact that it can do single, double, and triple is awesome. So here we're only sharing between 2 different atoms, but 4 bonds. 1, 2, 3, and then 4. So because carbon can form 4 bonds, can form fundamental structures like straight chain, branches, rings, and single, double, triple, carbon is basically found in all life. So let's talk about the 4 big molecules for life, macromolecules. These are large, organic, because they have carbon in them, molecules found in living things. And how they form is through a process called polymerization. Okay, polymerization. Polymerization, just, if we break down the word polymerization, poly means many. Okay, and so basically we're taking many pieces and we are gluing it together. So take all these little pieces, connect them together, bond them together, however you want to view it in your head. We're taking these small units and we're making bigger units. So here I have many small molecules by themselves, and then I'm going to link them all together. So these small molecules, we call them monomers, and mono means one. Okay, but if you connect a bunch of monomers together, now you get a polymer, and poly means many, and these are the larger units. So there are 4 kinds of macromolecules that you're going to need to know: carbohydrates, lipids, nucleic acids, and proteins. So let's start by looking at carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are made of 3 elements: carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, and it's always in a 1 to 2 to 1 ratio. That means for every 1 carbon, I'm going to have 2 hydrogens and 1 oxygen. Okay, glucose, just for fun, the chemical formula for glucose is C6H12O6. Okay, and you can see that the little subscripts down here are in a 1 to 2 to 1 ratio. I can take all of these numbers and divide by 6, and I get CH2, and then O. All right, so if you ever come across a compound with carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, and you see that 1 to 2 to 1 ratio, you know it's a carb. So what do we use carbs for? What do cells use carbs for? Basically, we use it for energy. Okay, it is very important in the process of cellular respiration, where you take glucose and oxygen and you break glucose down into carbon dioxide and water and energy, aka ATP. This is what your mitochondria does. But now that it's October, the mitochondria becomes the phytochondria, because it's the haunted house of the cell, right? Anyways, so that's the number 1 function right there. But it can also be used for structural support and protection. Carbs, depending on how you link them together, you can branch them, or you can alternate them upright and upside down and form something called cellulose, which is really hard to break down. They can provide a lot of structural support. So we find starches and cellulose in plants, and starch, a plant will store it for long-term energy use. But cellulose is actually what makes up cell walls. Okay, so cell wall provides a rigid protection outside of the cell membrane for a plant cell. Cellulose, it's really hard for us, like certain animals, to break down. So sometimes when you eat corn, you might poop out corn. Well, that's probably the cellulose there. So carbs, 2 jobs: store and release energy, and then structural support and protection. Okay, so the monomer, the single subunit for a carbohydrate, is called a monosaccharide. So this saccharide suffix is pertaining to carbohydrates. And when you link a bunch of monosaccharides together, you create a polysaccharide. So here I have the polymer, the polysaccharide, okay? Many subunits linked together. In the case, this is starch. And when I just take a look at one of these pieces, that's the monomer, and the monomer is called a monosaccharide. So glucose, monosaccharide. Okay, lipids, second macromolecule, made of carbon, hydrogen atoms. And the key characteristic of all lipids is that they do not dissolve in water. Okay, they are not soluble in water. They will not mix in water. So the 2 jobs for lipids, they store energy and they form biological membranes, or a waterproof covering. Every cell membrane is made of lipids. It's perfect. It's the perfect barrier between an organism and its environment, because you're mostly made of water, so you're going to keep the water inside of you, and it's just you interact with other things. I mean, it's just it works. So when we get to phospholipids, I'm going to come back to this lipids basically. But every cell membrane is made up of lipids. Okay. Now the monomers are a little bit tricky for lipids. Okay. We're going to go with fatty acids and glycerols. Okay, so just roll with it. This is what a lipid looks like. It's got a glycerol, which is 3 carbons, okay, and then it's got these fatty acid chains. And you can see that it's straight up carbon and hydrogen all the way down the board. This is like the lipid part. And the glycerol just kind of keeps these fatty acids together. So that's what we're going to just do. It's really hard to categorize monomers, so I'm just going to say fatty acids and glycerols. The polymers, okay, they have lots of different examples for polymers. You can say fats, oils, waxes, hormones, steroids. These are all polymers of lipids, okay? Now I put down here, I starred the double bond on this carbon. A lot of times, fatty acids, they might be 100% single bonds, but sometimes you see a double bond, and this actually has importance. Okay, so I'm going to go off on a little tangent here. If you come across a lipid that is in liquid form, that means that lipid has double bonds in its fatty acid tails, because it's harder to jam-pack these fatty acid tails together. When you look at this picture, they look like they're perfectly straight, but in real life, they're kinked. Okay, so in fact, this might actually tilt out that way and then continue on with the chain, and this might tilt out that way and continue on with the chain. I wish you could see me, but I like to stick my knee out awkwardly like a bird to show the kinkiness of these fatty acid tails. So as a result, you can't pack them together as tight because of the kink in them. So they are liquid. Now, if they are 100% straight, okay, single bonds, then you can pack them together, and at room temperature, the lipid is solid. So, just fun fact there. When you come across a solid fat at room temperature, it is saturated. We call that saturated because it's holding every single hydrogen it can hold. But if it's liquid at room temperature, then we call it unsaturated, and that's because it's got double bonds in it. But I don't think you really need to know that. But let's just recap here. Lipids store energy for long-term storage, okay, and they form membranes. Monomers are fatty acids and glycerols, and polymers, you can give me lots of different examples. Any of them are acceptable. Fats, oils, waxes, hormones, and steroids. Okay, third macromolecule of life is nucleic acids. These are made up of a bit more elements here. So we got our carbon, we got our hydrogen, we got our oxygen, and now I'm going to throw in some nitrogen and phosphorus. Okay. What's the job of nucleic acids? They store information. Okay. They store information for how to make proteins, for growth and development. I mean, it's basically the blueprint for that organism. The monomer, okay, the tiny little subunits that make up a nucleic acid are your nucleotides. And if you don't remember nucleotides, these are the letters. So way back in 7th grade, I said, A pairs with T and C pairs with G for your DNA. And if you're dealing with RNA, you get rid of T and now you have U. And I think I might have said all tigers can growl for your DNA. And for your RNA, I said all unicorns can giggle to help you remember your nucleotides. These letters do stand for stuff, and we'll go through their actual names. But, this is adenine, thymine, cytosine, guanine, and uracil. So all of these nucleotides are monomers of nucleic acids. And each nucleotide is made up of 3 things. We have a nitrogenous base, which I highlighted in green. They all have the same 5-carbon sugar and the phosphates. So this is where the phosphorus comes from, and this is where the nitrogen comes from. And then everything in between is carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Okay. The polymer for nucleic acid is basically a nucleic acid. So this is the polymer, this is the monomer. There are 2 types. There's only 2 types of nucleic acids that I know of, DNA and RNA. And we'll spend quite a few chapters discussing both of these. The final macromolecule, okay, proteins. And it's made up of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. I would also like to throw in like some sulfur, but we'll just leave it at CHON. The functions of proteins is numerous, okay? Everything. They do everything when you really think about it. They are responsible for movement. I mean, your muscles are made of protein. They are responsible for transportation. They move things across the cell membrane. They are responsible for a lot of structural things like spider silk. They are responsible for storage of, maybe hemoglobin in a red blood cell, as you can see here, which is transport as well. But I mean, they do everything. They have enzymes that carry out chemical reactions. They are part of your immune system. They are part of your endocrine system. Okay, hormones there are some hormones that are basically proteins. So they carry out a lot of jobs. So they might control, rate, or regulate reactions, help fight disease with your immune system, form cellular structures, and then transport materials. So your book lists these 4. In college bio, there's actually like 8. And if you write down like everything, I'm not going to like dock you because it's true. Going back to structural, like your fingernails, they're made of keratin. Your hair is made of keratin. Proteins are just everywhere. So monomers are called amino acids. Okay. So I'm going to abbreviate amino acids as 2 capital A's. There are more than 20 different amino acids, and they can combine in any order. Like an alanine can bond with another alanine, or it can bond with a serine. These are all amino acids. Each amino acid is also made up of 3 different parts. Okay. An amino group, there's the N for the CHON, and then a carboxyl group, a hydrogen, okay, and then this little R group. And this R is the specific side chain that makes that amino acid. So like if it's a CH3, well, then it will be alanine. If it's a CH2 bonded to an alcohol, okay, hydroxyl, then it's serine. So this R is what makes the amino acid that amino acid. And there's like 20 of them. So 20 different variations. Now, when you take 2 amino acids and you link it together, you form something called a peptide bond. And you only find peptide bonds in proteins. Proteins start with P, so does peptide bonds. So when you link a bunch of amino acids together, these are the monomers, you create a polymer called a protein. I like to think of it as pearls on a string here, right? All of these are amino acids. And proteins, they might be 100 amino acids long. They might be thousands of amino acids long. There's really no limit. I mean, if everything is basically got protein in it, every living thing, just think about all the different types of protein that are in you right now. It's insane. I'm almost like curious as to like how many different proteins are in the human body. Oh my gosh, I'm not the first to have thought this question. Scientists are not exactly sure, but most agree that there are around 20,000 different proteins in our body. Some studies suggest that there might even be more. Holy crumbs, that's a lot. Okay, anyways, back to biology. Here are a guide to the 20 common amino acids. Just looking about special structures. That R group, it might be ring shaped. What's another thing I could point out that wouldn't be too confusing? But anyways, here they are in their glory. Tryptophan is an amino acid. Maybe you've heard of tryptophan with turkey during Thanksgiving. Lysine, where are you? Lysine. Oh, there's lysine. If you are a big Jurassic Park fan, the original, 1993, the lysine contingency was that genetic alternation that the geneticist Dr. Henry Wu created in the dinosaur genome. And basically the dinosaurs could not make their own amino acid lysine. A lot of these amino acids are essential. Like sometimes your body can make some of these, like your body can naturally produce some of these, but there are others where your body cannot. So you have to eat other foods or animals, other things, we'll just say other things, to get the amino acids that you need to make proteins. So yeah, cool. Okay, let's just recap macromolecules, and then I think we'll call it a day. So let's start off with our first polymer, which was a carbohydrate. What is the monomer? I hope you're screaming monosaccharides. And the two jobs for carbs: energy, the big one; structure, like cellulose or starch. What are some examples? Anything that really has sugar in it, okay? Sugar, glucose, cellulose, sugar, candy bar, pasta, bread. Yum. Okay, lipids. The monomer for lipids, we are going to say fatty acids, glycerols. Function. Structure, membranes. How do I not have energy in here? Eat. I would, if you can scribble in energy, I would totally do that, because I feel like for long-term storage, we store that energy. We store that in lipids, fats, okay? Examples: fats, oils, waxes, steroids, and hormones. Third polymer, nucleic acids. Monomer, nucleotides. These are your letters, A, T, C, G, and U. The job of nucleic acids is to store information. And examples, there's really only two: DNA and RNA. Proteins. Proteins are made up of amino acids. What do? Everything. They transport, they provide support. They're part of our immune system. They carry out chemical reactions with enzymes, and so on and so forth. Okay, everything. Some examples. List goes on. Keratin, hair, nails, red blood cells, enzymes, muscles, steak, beans. Yeah. Okay. Well, that concludes this lecture. We identified the elements that carbon bonds with to make up life's molecules, like hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur, and why carbon is essential to carbon life forms, because they can form 4 bonds, and that kind of makes it a versatile building block to link things together. And then we went through the 4 groups of macromolecules, the big molecules, and the jobs and functions they provide with us. I hope this video was helpful. Adios.